I want to welcome all of you who are here today, and I notice we have a number of visitors with us today, and a special welcome to those of you who are visiting. So the title of the sermon today is 5 Ways to Honor Your Mother. So why are we preaching this today? It's not Mother's Day. Mother's Day was way back in May. So why are we doing this? Well, one reason is that the command to honor our mothers is one of the 10 commandments. And the 10 commandments are never out of season. In fact, when this sermon is over, I hope that each one of you will agree with me that every day is Mother's Day. Honor your mother. That's what the 5th commandment says. But how do you do that? How do you put that into practice? Well, there are 2 books that can help us. One is a Hebrew dictionary, and the other is a book called a concordance. We'll dip into the dictionary in a minute, but what is a concordance? Now, I know that some of you know this, but a concordance is a book that lists all the words of the Bible in alphabetical order, and then it tells you where each one of those words is found, every place it occurs in the Bible. An exhaustive concordance begins with the word Aaron, A-A-R-O-N, and it ends with the word Zuzim, Z-U-Z-I-M. And whereas the word Aaron occurs hundreds of times in the Bible, the word Zuzim only occurs once in the Bible in Genesis 14, verse 5. Now, what we're interested in this morning is what's found in the middle of that concordance. It's the word mother. And the word mother occurs more than 200 times in the Old Testament, and it occurs more than 80 times in the New Testament. So with the help of a Hebrew dictionary and a concordance, I came up with 5 ways to honor our mothers. 5 practical things that you and I can do to obey this command. I trust that you're looking at your sheet now, and we come to Roman numeral 1. There are 2 blank spaces there, and for the smaller children, I apologize to you because these are 2 big words. They're the biggest words that you're going to have to fill in today. So you might need some help, if not here at church, maybe from your parents at home. But here it is. Think of your mother as a heavyweight, not a lightweight. Can you fill that in? Heavyweight and lightweight. Think of your mother as a heavyweight and not a lightweight. Now, the reasoning behind that is this. The Bible says, honor your mother. Those words occur in Exodus 20, verse 12, and Exodus 20, verse 12 was written in Hebrew. So we can find the Hebrew word, which is translated by our English word honor. And when we do that, we look in the Hebrew dictionary and we see that that word literally means to be heavy, to be weighty, to honor. And so what God is saying to us, think of your mother as a weighty person in the sense of being an important person. For example, last Sunday morning we had a congregational meeting. And at that congregational meeting, we dealt with some weighty matters, some important matters. So when God attaches that word weight to the idea of motherhood, God is telling us that in his economy, God considers mothers to be very, very important, and he wants you and me to share his conviction that mothers are important to him and should be to us. Now, there's a very basic reason why each one of us should honor our mothers, should consider them to be important. It's very simple. And Job expresses it in Job 121, where Job says, I came out of my mother's womb. Now, of course, you were not aware of all that was happening at the moment that you came out of your mother's womb. But at that moment, and for a number of hours before that moment, your mother was working very hard in order to bring you into the world. She labored to give you birth. For that reason alone, you ought to think of your mother as someone who is worthy of all the respect and all of the honor that you can possibly give to her. You owe your very life to your mother. That's why Adam named his wife Life. That's what the word Eve means. Life. She was the mother of all living, Genesis 3:20. The whole idea of motherhood in the Bible is freighted with weight, with importance, with impressiveness, with honor. In God's mind, God's eyes, mothers are heavyweights, not featherweights. And they ought to be in your eyes as well. Now let's look at the second way we honor our mothers. Let's move now to Roman numeral 2. And here, children, the word is a little easier. This next word only has 6 letters in it, and I'll spell it for you. Recognize the 4 duties God has assigned to mothers. So write in the word duties. D-U-T-I-E-S. Duties. Now, I do not claim that this is an exhaustive list of the duties that God has assigned to mothers, but I do believe that we are getting to the heart of the matter with these 4 things. So what are the 4 duties? First of all, to be a nourisher. As I said, I still remember how I felt a month ago when Pastor Mark was preaching on Psalm 22, that psalm that begins, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I was in the back there. And God really impressed upon me the beauty and the wonder and the awesomeness of that, because as Mark pointed out, Jesus is speaking in that psalm. And in Psalm 22, verse 9, Jesus says, and at that point, Jesus is praying to his heavenly Father. And at that point, Jesus says to his Father, you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust you even at my mother's breast. That's what Jesus said. Mary nourished baby Jesus at her breast. God gives mothers an instinctive desire to see that her child's basic needs are met from day one. And so the first duty of a mother is to be a nourisher, to supply what is necessary for the life, the health, and the growth of her children. Now, the second duty of a mother, as we work through the concordance, God says is to be a comforter. In Isaiah chapter 66, verse 13, it says, "As a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you." That's God speaking. Listen to it again. God says, "As a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you." When God himself was looking for something in the realm of human experience with which to compare his own ministry of soothing the ruffled brow of care, he immediately thought of a mother. He thought of how naturally and instinctively a mother reaches out to give comfort to her child. Now, the interesting thing about Isaiah 66:13 is that the word translated child in that verse is the Hebrew word ish, I-S-H, which most often in the Bible means a full-grown man. So literally the Hebrew of that says, "As a mother comforts her full-grown son." According to the Bible, even full-grown men sometimes need a mother's comfort. Now, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 16:13. Romans 16:13 begins with the words, "Greet Rufus." Now, I'm sure that's one of your favorite verses in the Bible too, isn't it? Greet Rufus. But notice how it goes on. It says, "Greet Rufus and also his mother, who has been a mother to me also." That's the Apostle Paul speaking. He said that Rufus's mother performed the role of a mother in his life, even when he, Paul, was a full-grown man. Even the Apostle Paul, the great Apostle Paul, treasured a mother's comforting love, even though he was an ish, a full-grown man. The third duty of a mother is to be a teacher. And we turn now to Proverbs chapter 31. That's the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. That's the proverb about, the chapter about the wife of noble character. But before that, there are 9 verses leading up to that in which we have the sayings of King Lemuel. Listen to this. "The sayings of King Lemuel, an oracle his mother taught him." Get that? She taught him this. This is what she said. She said, "O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows, do not spend your strength on women, your vigor on those who ruin kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, not for kings to drink wine, not for rulers to crave beer, lest they drink and forget what the law decrees and deprive all the oppressed of their rights." And she goes on in verse 8 to give him this teaching: "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." Now, I do not know who King Lemuel was. I do know that King Lemuel's mother gave him some pretty clear teaching about what's right and what's wrong, about what he should do and what he should not do. Mothers, listen, in an age when large segments of our society vehemently deny that there even is such a thing as absolute right and wrong, your job is to teach your children in no uncertain terms what God says about right and wrong. Listen to how specific Lemuel's mother's teaching was. He said, Lemuel, don't spend your strength on women. Now it's time for a grammar lesson here. Has your teacher children ever taught you the difference between the singular and the plural? You know, nouns are persons, places, or things. You can have one of those things, or you could have two or three or many of those things. Singular is one, plural is more than one. Now, in that verse, does Lemuel's mother use the singular or the plural? Listen to it again. O my son, do not spend your strength on women. That's plural. She doesn't use the singular, woman. She's not telling him that he should never get married. She's warning him against having mistresses, lots of women. She's warning him not to go down the path that King Solomon went down with his 700 wives and 300 concubines. Do not spend your strength on women. Be a one-woman man, Lemuel. And then she says to those, Lemuel, it's not for rulers to crave beer. Other people might do that, but you need to keep your wits about you all the time. You're the king, Lemuel, and you need to have a clear mind so that as you work through issues and make decisions and make judgments, that your mind is not clouded by alcohol. So she says to him, do not crave beer, for that would deprive those of the judgment needed to perform their kingly duties. And then she says, Lemuel, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. What's the point? Here it is. Lemuel's mother was very specific in the teaching she gave to her son. And she based her teaching on the word and the law of God. Mothers, be specific in teaching your children the difference between right and wrong. So many people are not doing that today. We need to do that. We're talking about the duties of mothers to nourish, to comfort, to teach. And there's a fourth duty, and that's to discipline. And we come now to this interesting verse in the next to the last book of the Old Testament, the book of Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 13, and I'm going to read verses 2 and 3. These verses talk about two parents, a mother and a father, whom God tells to discipline their son. Listen to it. God says, on that day I will banish the names of the idols from the land, and they will be remembered no more, declares the Lord Almighty. I will remove both the prophets and the spirit of impurity from the land, and if anyone still prophesies, His father and mother, to whom he was born, will say to him, you must die, because you have told lies in the Lord's name. When he prophesies, his own parents will stab him. Well, what's going on here? Well, let me illustrate this with a story. Some of you have heard of a woman by the name of Johnny Erickson. And when Johnny Erickson was in her 20s, one day a young man came up to her and said, Johnny, God has told me that he wants me to marry you. And Johnny Erickson thought for a moment, and then she said, that is very interesting. You are the fifth man that God has told to do that. In other words, Johnny Erickson knew that God hadn't told any of those five men to marry her. It was a figment of their own imagination. Now that's what's going on here in Zechariah 13. In the Old Testament, God gave messages to prophets, true prophets, and they spoke God's message to God's people. But there were other people who were false prophets who claimed to have a message from God, who claimed that God had spoken to them, and God hadn't spoken to them at all. And that's what we have here in Zechariah 13. These grown children now who are claiming to be prophets when they're not prophets at all, they're false prophets. They have not received a message from God, and God says that the parents of those children should put them to death. Now, granted, that is a rather severe form of discipline. And this is no excuse for child abuse, but it shows how seriously God takes it when people claim to be speaking in his name when they have no message from God. But notice that father and mother in this passage, Zechariah 13, exercise discipline jointly. Verse 3, if anyone still prophesies, even though God has not made him a prophet, his father and mother, to whom he was born, will say to him, you must die, because you have told lies in the Lord's name. The father and mother here are agreed on what is right and what is wrong. And they are agreed on the punishment that is to be administered. Now, of course, here in Zechariah 13, we have an extreme situation. And as I said, this text is no excuse for child abuse. And at the same time, it establishes in no uncertain terms the fact that God expects parents to discipline their children when their children do wrong. The fourth duty of a mother and a father, to discipline. So here are the four duties that God assigns to mothers: nourish, to comfort, to teach, to discipline. And beloved, we honor our mothers when we encourage them in the performance of the four God-given assignments that God has given to them. Let's move on to Roman numeral 3 on the outline. Avoid the 7 things God tells us not to do to our mothers. Now, children, there are 3 blanks here in this section for you to fill in. You'll see them as we go along if you're following. First of all, don't hit or strike your mother. Exodus 21:15 says, anyone who attacks his father or his mother must be put to death. Children, don't ever hit your mother. Don't do that. One day, when I was a teenager, I got very angry at my mother, and I threw water in her face. It was a terrible thing to do. And I still wince today when I even think about that, what I did. Don't ever hit your mother. Don't rob your mother. Proverbs 28:24. He who robs his father or mother and says, it's not wrong, he is a partner to him who destroys. Don't chase your mother away. He who robs his father and drives out his mother is a son who brings shame and disgrace. Proverbs 19:26. Don't bring your mother to shame. Proverbs 29:15 says, the rod of correction imparts wisdom, but a child left to itself disgraces his mother. 29:15. How can you avoid disgracing your mother? Well, one way to do that is by taking it seriously when she spanks you, when she disciplines you. If you don't, God says, you'll turn out bad, and your mother will be brought to shame. And then don't ridicule your mother. Cursed is the man who dishonors his father or his mother. Deuteronomy 27:16. Don't do anything to make your mother look like a featherweight in the eyes of other people. And then don't forsake her teaching. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8 says, do not forsake your mother's teaching. And remember, that's one of the points we just covered, that teaching is one of the 4 duties that God has assigned to mothers. Do you want children? Do you want to look good? We all want to look good in front of other people, don't we? Do you want to look good in front of other people? The Bible tells you how you can do that. It says in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8, it says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland, a wreath of flowers. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. Obeying your mother will make you look good. And then don't despise your mother when she is, and here's the easiest word for you to write, children. It only has 3 letters in it. Old. O-L-D. Don't despise your mother when she is old. Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Now, do you know what it means to despise your mother? It means to think to yourself, my mother is no longer an important person in my life. It means to say to yourself, my mother is an insignificant person. She really doesn't matter all that much to me anymore. If I may speak a moment to those of us who are older, children, I'm not talking to you now, but if I may speak to those of us in the room who are older, perhaps whether or not we have fallen into that way of thinking is how often our mother receives a letter from us or a phone call. You know, as I look around, I am looking around, I see there's a significant number of us here today who can no longer write a letter to our mother. God has taken them from her from us. We can't do that anymore. But if your mother is still living, give her some of your time. Give her some of your time. Perhaps you will make a phone call this afternoon that you were not planning to make when you woke up this morning. Go for it. Don't despise her when she's old. 5 ways to honor your mother. Don't strike her. Don't rob her. Don't chase her away. Don't bring her to shame. Don't ridicule her. Don't forsake her teaching. Don't despise her when she is old. Now, Roman numeral 4. Practice the 4 P's of filial respect. Now, I'll be honest with you. I had to look up that word filial, Filial. I wasn't sure what that meant. It means things that pertain to being a son or a daughter. So if you're a son or a daughter, we show filial respect as a son or a daughter to mother, to father. Filial respect. And here are the 4 P's of filial respect. And God has graciously spelled out them for us. 4 positive things you can do to show filial respect. And your children, you have a chance to write 4 words. I'll spell each one of them for you. First of all, praise your mother. Praise. Praise. Praise your mother. Now, I've already mentioned Romans 16:13. Greet Rufus and his mother, who has been a mother to me also. Paul praises Rufus's mother. Sometimes God will bring into your life someone who is not your natural mother, and he did this for the Apostle Paul. God will bring into your life someone who is not a natural mother, who will be a mother to you, who will play the role of a mother, who will perform the duties of a mother to you and bring blessing into your life. You know, I think sometimes of people who become missionaries, who leave home, leave their country, maybe go halfway around the world. They leave their mother behind, they leave their father behind, they leave their brothers behind, they leave their sisters behind, they leave their house behind, they leave all those things behind. And you don't have that chance to fellowship together face to face, maybe for 4 years, because that's how long most missionaries stay overseas before they come back again. You know what God says? Jesus said this in Matthew 10. He says, if you do that, he says, if I call you to be a missionary, and you do leave your mother, and you do leave your father, and you do leave your brothers and your sisters, and you do leave your house behind, that house you love so much. If you do that, and you go wherever I send you to go, then wherever I send you to go, I will give you other mothers and other fathers and other brothers and other sisters and other houses to live in. Beloved, I've seen God do that for members of my own family. It's a great comfort knowing that God does that for his people. Praise your mother. The second thing, place your mother. Place. Place your mother. Now, here's the question. What place does God want you to give your mother? After all we've been saying, it might seem like your mother should have first place. But dear friends, that's not the case. God doesn't want your mother to have first place. in your life. Hear this. Your mother should have third place in your life. Follow me on this. It should be obvious to all of us who are believers that God wants to have first place in our lives. You shall have no other gods before me. Love God first of all, more than anybody else. And I have a story now. I'm going to interrupt the sermon and tell a little story. But this story is only for children who are 7, 8, and 9 years old. So children, this is just between you and me, and all the rest, they're not going to listen to this story. This is just for you and me, okay? You're 7, 8, and 9. When I was 8 years old, my mother and father and I were living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And one night, my mother put me to bed, and after she had me say the prayer that she had taught me, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And I prayed the prayer. And then for some reason, I said, Mommy, does God want me to love you more than I love him? And my mother said, yes, Tommy. God does want you to love him more than you love me. And I did not say this to my mother, but I remember it so very clearly, thinking and saying to myself, I will never love God more than I love my mother. Well, children, since then, I've learned some things about God which showed me that it's okay to do that. It's important to love my mother, yes. God never wants me to stop doing that. But he does want me to love him more than I love even my mother. So place your mother. Your mother's not in first place, so maybe she should be in second place. No, your mother's not in second place either. Because Genesis 2:24 says that a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife. So what's he saying? He's saying, once you get married, your relationship to your wife or your husband is more important in the eyes of God than your relationship to your mother. Both are important. Your relationship to your mother is very important. But if you are married, your relationship to your spouse is of higher priority in the eyes of God than your relationship to your mother. Place your mother. So where does that leave your mother? Hear it. It leaves her a very strong third. In God's eyes, third place is a winner too. Place your mother. Number 3, please your mother. Please. Please your mother. There's a story here in Luke chapter 2 when Jesus was 12 years old, and he had gone with his parents to Jerusalem for one of the feasts of the Jews. They left to go home thinking that he was somewhere in the group going back, but he wasn't. He had stayed behind in Jerusalem. They realized he wasn't with them. They go back. They spend several days looking for him. They finally found him. And Mary says to Jesus, Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And this is Jesus' answer. He says, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house? But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was, get this, and was obedient to them. After making it very clear to his parents that God occupied first place in his life, I must be about my Father's business. After making that clear, Jesus did not use that as an excuse for not submitting to his parents. He went back to Nazareth and he obeyed mommy and he obeyed daddy. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. 99 times out of 100, when you please your mother, you'll also be pleasing God. And then provide for your mother. Provide. Provide for your mother. John 19, beginning in verse 25. Jesus is on the cross. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother. And when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciples whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, this disciple took John into her home. Get the picture. Even when Jesus was in the middle of the most important work he ever did, and in sheer agony, he didn't forget the needs of his mother. He asked the Apostle John to take Mary into his home, into his family, and he did. He provided for his mother as he was about to leave this world. The 4 P's of filial respect. Praise your mother, place your mother, please your mother, provide for your mother. Now, beloved, in view of all we have seen so far this morning, the 5th and final way of honoring your mother follows very naturally. Mourn your loss when God calls your mother H-O-M-E. Write that in there. Home. Mourn your loss when God calls your mother home. And if you want to, you can add the words to heaven. When God calls your mother home to heaven. In Psalm 35, verse 14, King David says, "I bowed my head in grief, as though weeping for my mother." Beloved, it is altogether unnatural not to mourn the loss of the one who labored to give you life. Altogether unnatural not to mourn the loss of the one who nourished you, who comforted you, who taught you, who even disciplined you. When God calls your mother home, it's appropriate to mourn your loss. Now, there's one more thing for us to do. Because if I stopped here, this would be a totally unacceptable sermon. The whole Bible is meant to point us to Jesus. And so far, this sermon has not done that, except incidentally. This sermon has not pointed us to Jesus, but maybe it has. Just maybe it has. Because in a way, everything that we have said so far in this sermon does point us to Jesus. How? How so? In this way. Having looked at the 5 ways we can honor our mother if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit that most of us don't have a very good track record. We all fall short. We haven't fully grasped how weighty our relationship to our mother really is in the light of God's word. Too often we have regarded our mothers as featherweights. Our gratitude for what our mothers have done to nurture, to comfort, to teach, to discipline us is less than it should be. And in that list of 7 things not to do to our mothers, surely there are at least 1 or 2 things on that list that convict us. And when it comes to praising our mothers and placing our mothers and pleasing our mothers and providing for our mothers, in these areas too, we all fall short. To be perfectly truthful about it, each one of us has been weighed in the balances this morning and found wanting. To use the biblical word, we have all sinned when it comes to this 5th commandment: honor your mother. Our track record is nothing to boast about. So what do we need? We need Jesus. We need Jesus. I need Jesus for all the times I dishonored and disobeyed and disrespected my mother. Why Jesus? Why Jesus? Because he had a perfect track record of obeying his mother. He honored his mother 24/7 for 33 years. And you know what? He is willing to give to you his perfect record of obedience to the 5th commandment as a free gift to get you into heaven. And there's even more. The penalty in the Old Testament for dishonoring your mother, as we have seen, was death. That penalty has never been revoked or taken away. It's still in force. Today, God often delays the penalty, but only until the day of judgment. The wages of sin is still death. But here's the good news. If you have bowed the knee to Jesus Christ and owned him as your Lord and Savior, then he has stood as a substitute in your place. That's what he was doing on the cross, dying for you, dying the death you deserve to die because of your disobedience to the 5th commandment. Yes, you and I need Jesus big time. And if you have never bowed your knees to Jesus Christ and ask him to save you, oh, my friend, do that. Do that. Ask him to save you. One more thing. I can foresee a father, I don't want this to happen. I'm trusting it's not going to happen. But I can foresee perhaps a father or a mother here this morning going home after the service, after hearing the sermon, and saying to your children, "Didn't you hear what the pastor said this morning? Honor your mother." No difference. No. Be gentle. Be gentle with your children. Discipline them, yes, but with gentleness. After all, your track record isn't all that great either. You have your own sins that need to be forgiven, as do I. Well, every sermon has to have a final sentence. And here it is. If this sermon today has done only one thing, I hope it has convinced you that every day is, say it with me, Mother's Day. Say it again. Every day is Mother's Day.